Welcome to the Azure Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Ross Kennedy. Thank you for joining us in this podcast series as we speak to cloud-first companies, technology leaders, and venture capitalists on all things innovation. When we talk about AI, many people wonder what the impact will be on our society and our planet. That's why I'm so excited today to introduce you to Bert Van Hoof, COO of Willow, a company that helps make buildings work smarter to save businesses money, but more importantly, to save our environment. Welcome, Bert.
Thank you, Ross. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to see you, sir. Well, let's just jump straight in. Maybe you can tell us what the mission for Willow is, what it does, and maybe you can help explain to some of those what a digital twin is.
Yeah, our mission in general, as we like to say now, is to build intelligence into structures and infrastructure. And what does that mean? Well, we focus on making buildings and facilities work smarter for the people that use them, as well as the organizations or businesses that they serve, and the environment, as you already alluded to. But we think of it quite expansively. Buildings and facilities are everywhere, right? As we walk or drive or fly around, we see buildings all around us. And it's kind of how we function as humans, right? We work, play, live, as we always say, in buildings and facilities of any kind. And none of these buildings stand or operate in isolation, right? They're always part of a bigger picture. And I'll give a few examples because sometimes people used to talk about smart buildings, and we're talking about kind of the next generation of that. But they used to think of the residence people live in or an office they used to work in. But like in healthcare, a smart building is a smart hospital or an elder care facility. Those have relationships to labs and pharmacies and waste processing facilities. And, an airport, DFW is international airport. Dallas-Fort Worth is a big customer of Willow. They have terminals, essential utility plant, parking facilities, runways, airplane hangars. That's all part of the structures and infrastructure. On the retail side, where we're also quite active now, we have the relationships to the distribution centers and warehouses, all the connected supply chain and logistics. So it's this really bigger pictures. And before goods reach a warehouse or distribution center, they're produced in a manufacturing plant, which has a building envelope. And things are transported to ports like an airport. We deal with education campuses right now as well. They're often connected to sport facilities or even stadiums at universities. SoFi Stadium is a big customer of Willow and the surroundings, Hollywood Park, which we can all talk more about. But there's corporate campuses. So it's very, very expansive, and all of them have their relationships to all the utilities, electricity, gas, water, waste, which have their own facilities. So we aim at digitizing that built world for, as we say, a better world, right? And there's the important realization that saving money and saving the planet are no longer exclusive, or that they'll have to be. And buildings are becoming a key part of important secular trends now as well around energy transformation, electrification, and specific, very acute topics, especially AI and the data centers are now contributing to a lot of issues on the supply side, and how do important new concepts like grid interactive efficient buildings, distributed energy resources, virtual power plants are all becoming a focal point. I was in DC last week, and demand is the new supply is a great tagline. We can't just build more capacity and build more transmission lines. And so how to become buildings a key part of all of this. And there's some interesting stats. About 3/4 of all electricity consumption in the United States goes to the built world. 40% of emissions comes through that. So with all the lofty projections and ambitions around net zero and all of those kind of concepts, you cannot ignore the built world, right? And so that's our playground, and that's our mission, to build intelligence into all of that infrastructure.
That's amazing. So airports, hospitals, stadiums, like you said, it's a profound impact. I know, according to the NACD, that there's an increased focus on board of directors, making sure that they are not just driving profitability, but that their ESG is also in consideration. Essentially, what are they doing around sustainability? And buildings, as you point out, are one of those very big drivers behind that. Maybe you could tell us a little bit. What are some of the key innovations of Willow? Sort of what makes Willow so innovative?
Yeah, you mentioned the digital twin concept earlier. Willow is certainly a pioneer in that department, right? This whole notion of building a digital replica of the real world or the physical world. And there's been a lot of confusion, as always, when new tech comes around. We have the same problems around AI in general now, right? There's not just generative AI. There's more concepts. The same is true around building digital twins and where that all started. So a lot of people confuse it with all the 3D modeling that has been going on in the BIM world in specific. And then I mentioned earlier there was the concept of smart buildings, and it started with how do you bring first those two concepts together, and how do you basically make the bridge between the OT world, the IT world, and then that 3D modeling. So we always tell the story about we bring all the spatial static and live data together into a single model. So that's where it starts. And that was the first phase of our journey. Basically, if I go back through the last 5 years, all around collecting, normalizing, and modeling rich and complex data from that wide variety of sources into our knowledge graph. And that the knowledge graph is a way where we connect entities, concepts, and the relationships and model that all together. But I would say that was necessary and not sufficient. And, to kind of talk about that expansiveness to some degree beyond the building management system that would typically connect to HVAC and lighting, security systems. Now you have, with the IoT revolution, that's a huge part of my background, everything is now getting connected. So how do you bring all of that data together? And then with the IT world, all your LOB systems, property technology, unique stuff around your leases and stuff, maintenance management systems, the CMMS systems, all the energy sources, carbon accounting, carbon emissions, real-time emissions, marginal emissions. How do you bring all of that data in, climate risk, flood predictions and hot weather events and all of that stuff? So I would still say necessary, but not sufficient. So modeling that all together was great, but then, we kind of lived our own version of the Gartner cycle. Certainly digital twins had its own trajectory, but which is always projecting when there is an innovation trigger like digital twins, when are you going to get to that plateau of productivity? First going to the peak of inflated expectations, and certainly we lived through that. Bringing all that data together, a lot of anticipation around that, and expectations as well. It was going to solve world hunger and world peace, and then some other gnarly problems. But then you ran through that trough of disillusionment, right? Okay, I got all of this together, which is fantastic, but now what do I do with that? What is the actual value? And I would say we don't went through a period of building analytics and dashboards and certainly moved the needle. But over the last, I would say, 12 to 18 months in particular, but it's been a longer investment, we brought in more and more of our AI capabilities to generate advanced insights with impact assessments, which we can come back to, but to ultimately drive intelligent action, remediation of problems, and automation, right? That's where it gets really interesting with all the talk around AI now and all the announcements that were made. There's a big push around memory and action, right? And so that's also in our world, in the physical world, very much the case. How do you know the history of the building and everything around all these assets that is placed there? How can we drive action? And this is where we enable autonomous observation, understanding of complex interaction, behavior, performance patterns, and that's really it. So data plus what we call skills or activate technology through the knowledge graph, drive insights with impact scores. And what that really means is you've had in our space and in other areas as well, you had a lot of fault detection and diagnostic systems and rule-based systems. And those are great and they move the needle, but now next generation problems around some of the topics we already mentioned are going to require next generation solutions. And it's really the insights with impact scoring can be quite complex, right? And so we've far transcend HVAC because of all these systems and understanding the relationships between them. Like in retail, we see things around, hey, large retailers with lots of coolers, for instance. Part of it is, monitoring those systems, and if something goes down, fix it. But that's what we used to do. Now, understanding the complex relationships between or ripple effects when something does go awry really makes you urge towards predictive insights, leading indicators, and understanding those ripple effects really helps us with building very sophisticated impact scoring. And what that means is if a cooler or a refrigerator in retail goes down, all of a sudden you in a time ticker where at some point you have to dispose of that food because of FDA regulations. And that could really amount to massive costs, right? Part of the shrinkage story. Now, what are the ripple effects? Well, you have lost inventory, restocking fees. Now you need to take into account all the supply chain and logistics ramifications of that. You obviously have lost margin and revenue. You have customer dissatisfaction because you may have an empty cooler. And that gets quite sophisticated. And so we do more than digitize a building, right? We enable what we call oversight, insight, and foresight. Quickly walk through that because they're important concepts. Oversight over all the systems and the activities within a building, how they relate to one another. Oversight across all the buildings within a local setting like a campus or an airport or a globally distributed portfolio. Oversight across all the shared infrastructure like a central utility plan and the utilities that interconnect the building. So all versions of oversight. Insight into what the most pressing pain points are that need attention, right? To my earlier point, it's not just an insight, but the impact scores help you filtrate the difference between that $5 issue or a $50,000 issue. Insight into often very non-trivial cause and effect relationships. This is where the knowledge graph comes in that transcend multiple operational systems. Insight into the impact on things like cost, energy consumption, carbon, comfort, compliance, building health and wellness, and things that I already mentioned, like even food shows in the retail setting. And it's amazing how these concepts translate. Like at the DFW airport, you have luggage handling. If a motor goes out, that may be a $200 fix, but every piece of luggage that missed the flight can be up to $2,000 to go rectify the situation. So understanding those ripple effects. And then ultimately foresight to predict failures. As I mentioned, go more into leading indicators, find problems before they occur, obviously, so they can be prevented altogether. Foresight into changing conditions that may affect operations like weather events, power outages, simple energy price fluctuations, and how to take optimal advantage, right? As we get into things like solar behind-the-meter storage and EV charging infrastructure, for instance, those become complex to look at all of those aspects of foresight. And then foresight into the plausibility of publicly committed long-term targets like net zero ambitions, right? So all of that fits into the purview. And so hopefully that helps paint the picture.
That's incredibly powerful. I appreciate that. I think what I'm hearing is you're moving beyond simple dashboards and into actionable insights, intelligent automation, which I think you called active control, and then being predictive on leading indicators to give someone a real sense of their total business, almost that ownership mindset, as you'd said.
Yeah, and also not looking at the assets in isolation as pieces of equipment or devices, but really looking at the building and the activity that takes place within it, right? So increasingly, people are finding that this capability now translates into retail, for instance, not just on maintenance of all the facets within a retail setting, but also operations, merchandising. Now I can track things, I understand the full spatial context of where all these things are, how they relate to one another, etc. So yeah, that's where it becomes really powerful and becomes truly a platform where people start to get really creative very quickly. Some of these examples that I use get people into a different frame of mind. It's like, oh, you're not just doing heating and cooling or HVAC systems, right? No. It translates across all of all of that physical world infrastructure that you have and how it serves the business and how it serves the activity that's supposed to take place within the building. So
across all of the asset types, and then how do they interplay against one another? Now, I know I've been an incredibly excited partner for Willow. I wonder, what is it that made you choose Azure as the platform to build on?
Oh boy, many reasons. Some in the audience will definitely know my background. So I spent 20 years at Microsoft, but I met Josh, the founder of Willow, back in 2017. So we go way back, and I had something to do with talking him into why Azure was going to be a good bet. But it was really, even today, considered a really good call. It's where we grew up. It's where I grew up. It's where Willow grew up. But parts of that are Microsoft as a real partner. Microsoft is that platform company, but no matter what the size, Microsoft always treated Willow as a real partner, and a lot of co-innovation took place there. So there was a mutual respect that even small Willow could stand on the shoulders of the giant, but also getting their respect back. And so it became a really synergistic relationship, and a lot of respect in both directions, what each could bring to the table, and how co-innovation played into that. And there were actual co-innovation activities around Azure Digital Twins, around the ontologies, around that, the open source ontologies, around buildings, the grid, smart cities, that Willow heavily contributed to and in some cases led on. So we created many industry firsts along the way with great respect. And then obviously there's the enterprise side of it. We're an enterprise SaaS product. And so obviously a core strength of Microsoft, even now, with all the latest OpenAI, Omnio announcements and Gemini, etc., some of these drift to consumer very heavily. We believe there is a big play here around the enterprise, and Microsoft is kind of that other side of the equation where there's extreme strength, compliance, security, and then connective tissue to other Microsoft products like Dynamics. We've done a unique integration with Dynamics for Field Service, Cloud for Sustainability, and other things that are in the works as we speak. And so, that's... I probably forgot a couple of good reasons, but it's been a very warm relationship. I mean, maybe I'll add just the whole notion of co-sell, the Azure Marketplace. We transact fully through the Azure Marketplace right now. So we're truly partnering in both directions.
Yeah, and we've been a grateful partner. Like you said, co-innovation, platform and tools, integrated one story. And obviously we've got a great GTM reach, especially through the marketplace. Our security story is very strong. Maybe you can talk briefly about what are the technologies behind the solution, and maybe even focus a little bit on the Azure services.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're an enterprise SaaS solution. We're fully built on Azure. We always joke we're unapologetically all in on Microsoft. So everything under the hood is definitely Microsoft. So if I think back to what I mentioned, how Willow functions and how we collect, validate, transform, normalize all of that into the graph. So the spatial static live data, spatial data is everything from abstract geometry, maps and layouts, to 2D, 3D design geometry. We're doing some very unique work, since the topic is AI here as well, to how can we ingest a lot of the data that we bring into the mix in a more automated and productive fashion. And so there's many components in the AI spectrum that feed into that. We've been experimenting quite a bit with GPT-4 Turbo with Vision. Now if Omnio is out, so we'll keep being on that trajectory and lean in on GPT-5 as well. But there's the Pi models as well, the small models that come into the mix for everything from single line diagrams to full-on BIM models, RISA diagrams, etc. So when I mentioned static data earlier, that's everything from warranty records to user manuals. All of that comes into Willow. And so the data extraction out of that's obviously will LLMs play a key role as well. So that's one component on that spatial and static data ingestion. And that can also be data stored in LOB systems. So the Power Platform comes into the mix there as well, where applicable. So we have a lot of out-of-the-box connectors that take advantage of all of that fabric. And there's the live data, right? The live telemetry data, and any command and control back our active control goes through Azure IoT, my old wheelhouse. Then on the graph side, there's Azure Digital Twins that comes into the mix. So that's where we use the industry and domain-specific ontologies, instantiate that topology, modeled entities interconnected through the knowledge graph. That all happens in that fabric. And so that's with the live data ingestion from Azure IoT, we get that always up-to-date representation of operational state within Azure Digital Twins. And then there's a time component, the data history, how does the topology, how does the physical world itself evolve over time? So that's where time series comes into the mix, where we use Azure Data Explorer. So there's a strong, unique combination between Azure Digital Twins and Azure Data Explorer that will help pioneer as well when some of those features came out. And then the last lane is obviously AI. That's where the observation and understanding of those complex interaction behavior and performance patterns comes into the mix, and our Willow Activate technology. And we use Azure AI services broadly and the OpenAI service in specific.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate that, Bert. And so, I was fascinated by this earlier when you mentioned Dallas-Fort Worth. Maybe you can give us a couple of customer examples that you've impacted with your solution to help sort of create that connected story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's what we call our Lighthouse customers. So they've been on this whole 5-year journey plus with us on the commercial buildings of multiple types. Brookfield, obviously one of the biggest asset management companies in the world, with a huge New York City portfolio as well. So we've proven substantial savings in that portfolio there. Unique aspects in New York City as well, with Local Law 97, thinking about sustainability angle. And now big penalties kicking in if you can't do proper carbon accounting and try for reduction. That's a key thing too with that whole notion of a broad digital twin and all these assets into play. When you would think about sustainability, there's always the record, report, and then reduce, right? There's a lot of activity in record and report. When it comes to facilities, still very much a bit of the Stone Age. And so I'm using this in the context of what we've done in the specific area here. But people doing manual data collection in spreadsheets, right? So how do we automate that? First of all, reporting, the connection with the Cloud for Sustainability and Microsoft Sustainability Manager as well, but ultimately the ability to reduce, right? Where you bring in all of this action component of everything I described earlier, and where we feel we have a true next generation solution for these next generation problems, because that's where everybody is now grappling for, even if I have the accurate reporting, what do I do about it, and how do I actually reduce? So great examples there with key customer in Brookfield. We added education campuses. Northern Arizona University is a great example of a co-sell with Microsoft, but the entire campus is connecting into Willow. Most of that done at this point. So we'll have a very interesting summit in July with many other campuses coming into the mix, but that's becoming a rich playground. There's corporate campuses. We're on the Microsoft campus, the Walmart campus for their new home office. All activities that started way back in 2019 and have gone through the journey with us. Entertainment districts at large. SoFi Stadium runs on Willow. It's a very impressive showcase, a flagship implementation with now further expansion into Hollywood Park, where you have residences, hotels, restaurants, parking, the NFL headquarters, etc. Airport, already mentioned DFW Airport. It's such a great showcase, and that is the second largest airport in the world. It's about the size of Manhattan, so it's massive playground. And then expansion into retail, as I mentioned already. So yeah, very, very cool spectrum of applications. There's hospitals coming in, and yeah, it's been a fascinating ride, and a lot more to come. And I will say that the reason why we're winning these kind of major accounts and big brands is that the entire space is just been enamored and myopically focused with HVAC. And we focus on the full spectrum of the rich interaction of people, places, devices. And it drives into a whole new area of activity domains, and that's, and creativity, and that's where people, we're just starting on the journey. Let's put it that way. Like people discovering new applications for what we can do now on an almost day-to-day basis. And that will go on for quite some time.
Well, I think what's impressive there too, Bert, isn't just sort of the credibility of those large companies and well-recognized brands. It's just the diversity of those brands as well. It just goes to show how powerful this can be. Now, I did hear a rumor that Willow is building a co-pilot, pulling in multimodal capabilities. I wonder, can you give us a sneak peek?
Yes. Well, I think it's probably one of the most exciting things we've been working on. Given all this unique ability we have in the knowledge graph, and then the fact that we bring in all the spatial and static data all into Willow, that gives us a very cool playground to go to town with all the new capabilities. Now, I would say, on the AI side, we've been active across a number of fronts here, right? AI is not just about Gen AI, but Gen AI has become very fascinatingly powerful when you combine it with some of the AI activities that have been built over the years. So yes, as an example, because we have all the knowledge of the rich interaction, the history of work order tickets, all the user manuals, the training manuals, all of that comes into Willow. And it gives a rich playground for a co-pilot where now we can generate an insight, a rich insight. We can run automated diagnostics on that. And then a technician who goes outside can invoke the co-pilot, which has full context of that insight, but taking all this other data into consideration and really starts on the fix and literally has an interaction where they can say, hey, I did this and I see this result, and the co-pilot will interact and say, well, you should do this next or try this, and what did you see? So that's definitely the future. There is the multimodality aspect of it that we're very interested in. As part of the recent announcements with Omnio, etc., voice is going to become an interesting part that we're experimenting with. There's a multimodal aspect too of the co-pilot interacting with the rest of the user interface of Willow as well, bringing that data in context and getting these richer insights and bringing the full graph understanding what connects to what are the inputs and outputs, and guiding through the co-pilot to the right insights and getting that visually in front of you. But you may be a technician that's, fixing something laying on your back, and just having a voice interaction is still getting great guidance. So, still early days to some degree, but very amazing, encouraging results there. And we very much look forward to it. I mean, people's minds will be blown as they start to unpack. And this comes back to my earlier notion around, yes, the consumer will always drive progress in its own unique way, but these type of enterprise applications and just the notion of how AI is going to interact with the physical world, as I said, is going to be mind-blowing. And it'll go through many permutations as we refine and work closely with Microsoft on those kind of applications. But we very much look forward to it.
I mean, even just look at the leap from GPT-3 to 4 and 4 to Turbo and then to 4.0. I mean, it's exciting to think of what will be in 18, 24 months from now. But as you said earlier that you'd been with Microsoft for quite a while before joining Willow, one of the core things I always love to ask entrepreneurs is, what guidance would you give others who are looking to build AI-powered solutions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit that hype cycle, right? It's the Gartner hype cycle and that typical shave that you see. And we all know it's unavoidable, right? So there is a lot, depending on which spectrum of AI, you're either on the peak of inflated expectations or already on that slope of enlightenment. What Gartner always tries to do is predict it's going to take a year, 2 years, 5 or 10 years, right? It is all evolving so quickly, so fast. I'm listening to all the Guru podcasts as well and stay very much attuned to all of it. And it's just fascinating. And you're going to have to experiment, keep an eye on those cost and performance aspects, because you can definitely run into a number of surprises, but also work closely with Microsoft, right? Or there's many ways to do that, depending on what type of company you are and what the relationship is. But it can be from all the public documentation available to specialized programs, etc., that you can take full advantage of. And certainly for the startup space, there's plenty going on the Microsoft side. So it takes full advantage and lean in and keep experimenting and keep following it closely. The big challenge is going to be with the rapid evolution. You see effectively some areas being somewhat disintermediated. There's a lot of discussion now around translation companies and education, etc., where clearly the rich models are going to be quite impactful and potentially very disruptive. But yeah, I think a comment I heard over the last few days was that there's such an admiration now with all the benchmarks and how many million tokens and all of that, right? Where it's a classic problem that I feel we've gotten quite good at it, not using the buzzwords and the jargon as much as what it can do to the customer. And I think for every startup that remains very important as well. That's certainly our singular focus. Our previous version of our website had digital twins plastered all over it. And while that remains very much core to our capabilities, it doesn't mean much to people, right? So we started talking about savings and all dimensions around that, sustainability, explaining and unpacking what we could do there. Security, if you're going to digitize, how do you do it responsibly? And there's both a physical and a cyber aspect to that in the built world, of course. But yeah, always stay attuned to what you're going to bring to the world. I used to have a depiction of all the buzzwords Azure that kind of come up over the years. I mean, 15 years ago, people were still grappling with cloud and what it was going to do. For people who are laughing at it, for that matter. That's all been demystified. IoT was kind of Internet of Things and what that actually meant, and people were grappling with that. And then you had intelligent edge, intelligent cloud, digital twins, intermediate with that, all the versions of AI, from machine learning to reinforcement learning to now into the GPTs and Gen AI. And I always try to tell people, look, all of these buzzwords are very real and they're important, but you don't need to get lost in it per se, right? To always ask the question of what it's going to do to you. And they typically get fully demystified over a 5-10 year period, whatever it is. It seems to go faster and faster for those demystification cycles. But it's always easy in hindsight. But I think both from the people who develop solutions as well as the customers, it's very important to be plugged in, understand those sides of the equation, and not get lost in the technology weeds necessarily entirely.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bert. And I appreciate your time and the conversation today. I think I'm pretty excited about Willow and what it has to offer, both for sustainability, but also just in the Microsoft ecosystem. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. If you'd like to learn more about Azure services that will help you build generative AI apps, check out the website. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Bert. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Ross.